So moving on to the area of scale. Is it important? Many people will say small is beautiful. Why is scale important? What does it actually do for us? And really, in many cases, it's about putting in place the building blocks to be able to cope with supply chain shocks. It's about being able to put yourself in a position to raise the capital and investment that you need to expand. It's about putting yourself in the position to actually invest in the leaders of tomorrow so that you actually can attract the talent that you need and also be able to develop that talent. It can give you access to enhanced distribution channels and product portfolios. So different people will pull out of this. And in many cases, it is a core competence of the company. It's the ability to actually make acquisitions and scale the company, which becomes the competence as opposed to the original business. So really, if you look at it, it's something which is no longer an optional extra. It's something which is in an Ireland Inc. perspective really important. I was actually going to drop this slide out after yesterday's sad defeat, but it's very difficult to talk about scale, particularly in the dairy industry, without talking about Fonterra. It's obviously the one that's always talked about when you talk about dairy, and there's always so many parallels drawn between the Irish experience and the New Zealand experience. And it's the model that's most widely quoted when referencing global consolidation in the dairy sector. The figures are impressive. I mean, it's a massive company. It's a global cooperatively owned company, and it represents a quarter of all New Zealand's exports. So a massive merchandise exports, but it's a really significant company within the whole New Zealand economy. You'll be familiar with the statistics that are used all the time, but when quotas come in, we produce 5 billion litres. 40 years later, we'll still be at 5 billion litres, and New Zealand has moved on to, I think it's 20 billion litres it will be at the end of the period. So again, it's seen to have offered great opportunity from a New Zealand perspective. The company has turnover of 19.8 billion New Zealand dollars, which is about 12 billion euros. But they're exporting, they're operating in 100 countries. The reason why I mention Fonterra is not because I think it's the business model for Ireland's dairy sector. I think what it does is it demonstrates what scale has done to the dairy sector and to a leading exporter. However, there are two sides to the coin. There's a high level of debt in the farm level in Fonterra. They've had various issues in terms of the food security side. So their sustainability credentials are probably not what Ireland's are. So the question I want to pose today is there a different way? It isn't necessarily the status quo or the Fonterra model, but is there an Irish way? As many companies and countries actually try to harness the global opportunities for the sector, I think we need to say, what's the appropriate model for Ireland for scale going forward? How do we actually get the best of what we currently have and the best of the Fonterra system in terms of what it has done for them? And I think that it's about getting the scale, but also keeping the agility and being able to have first mover advantage so that you have the benefits of the collective for everybody. Closer collaboration and pooling and sweating our assets are things which I think are good for us in terms of being able to make the most of scarce resources, scarce energy, scarce time. However, bigger isn't always better, and I think the Irish dairy sector needs to maintain its flexibility and nimbleness. The cooperative movement has served us very well to date, and in order to be truly competitive in the future, we need to be bigger, better and stronger. And what I'm setting out for discussion is a third way, which is basically incorporating the shared history and experience of what we have and what we've coined the strategy executed through scale. So both Kerry and Glanbia have been successful in adopting the bigger is better approach, while maintaining their nimbleness. And I think from an Irish perspective, we really need to try and develop our own Irish solution to the Irish situation, as opposed to automatically lifting the Fonterra model. Just looking at the evolution of the industry within Ireland, and you can see here across the top the growth of the country. Dairy farm numbers have gone from 144,000 in 75 down as far as 19,000 in 2010. Dairy cow numbers have reduced over that period from 1.4 million approximately down to 1.1. Milk delivered, as I've said, over the last 30 years has remained at around the 5 billion litres level. And the milk yield per cow, that has grown impressively. You can see here the volatility in the milk price over the period. So, from 21 to 30 to 27 to 30, so quite a bit of volatility. The average herd size has gone up over the period from 9.6 up as far as 60. So significant growth in that. Now, just to put that into context relative to the New Zealand numbers, average herd size in New Zealand is 386. So still quite a bit of differential in that side. Just looking at the evolution of scale and structure in Ireland, you can see that right back the whole emergence of scale and how both from the Glanbia, just to take two examples of two different sizes of entities, Glanbia, initially the Waterford and Avonmore co-ops formed in 64 and 66, coming together, becoming listed companies, merging into Avonmore Waterford and renamed into Glanbia. On the Arrivo side, you've NCF with Midwest and Kiltore, becoming Shannon side, linking up with Midwest Co-op into Connacht Gold, and then Arrivo. So the story of consolidation isn't something which is new in Ireland. It's actually been happening for quite a period of time. Just taking it as to why that would happen. I mean, I suppose if you look in the early days of scaling, a lot of it was about actually being defensive. It was taking out the competitor. It was either deciding, eat this person or be eaten. So it was really in order to enter new markets, to hold on to what you had, and it was all about mergers and acquisitions. And that was actually the only mindset that was possible. More recently, it has evolved into doing it as a means of getting into new markets, acquiring brands. If you take, for example, even moving out of the dairy sector, the Weetabix acquisition, or initially private equity went into it, and more recently it has been bought by a Chinese company, or 60% of it. So, but a much greater emphasis in recent times on collaboration and joint ventures, about people deciding, let's work together in this, as opposed to feeling that it has to be a win-lose situation, that one of them has to win. So, in many cases, people are entering into more collaborative relationships, longer-term contracts, which is something which provides stability in many ways, and this could equally be said so in the dairy sector, that some of the companies are now moving towards longer-term contracts for some of their output, and it's really about trying to provide a more predictable marketplace going forward. So what I would say is the whole collaboration doesn't have to be an acquisition. It doesn't have to be somebody, taking your assets. It actually can be about sweating the assets on both sides, working together collaboratively to say, how can we all make the most of what we have in order to get the appropriate scale for our sector in a planned way. Looking at it from the supply chain side, and you probably think I've put in the wrong slide here, but I suppose a question, CRH. Is CRH a buildings and material company? Anybody in the audience familiar with CRH? Construction, yeah. So this is your concrete block, presumably coming across. There are many people who would say that the core competence of CRH is actually more in the mergers and acquisition technology than in the product. That's not to say that they're not producing concrete blocks or cement globally, but really what they have been able to do is acquire companies around the world and integrate successfully whatever company it is into the CRH way. So the core competence has moved from the product that they once produced to the technology of actually absorbing acquisitions, picking the right spots and absorbing them. Keelings, many of you will be familiar with in the soft fruit industry in Ireland. And I suppose the question, what's the most exciting opportunity facing Keelings? And they've developed a very strong position in the marketplace in the whole area of soft fruit. Major players. In terms of the future, Keelings have developed supply chain efficiency, and this really has become one of the key areas of growth for Keelings. So what they effectively have is selling the technology of the whole logistics side has allowed them to actually develop positions in global markets. And that technology, that expertise is one of the key things which is providing significant opportunities across the world for them. Just looking at the supply chain model, and you can see the traditional supply chain here going from the farmer through to the processor, the warehouse, the retailer and the consumer. So very standard, and all of the services and suppliers into the supply chain below. In reality, this model is the same for all food and drink companies. If you look again at this model, the logistics, the direction of that supply chain isn't going to change. The mechanics of it are the same. Really, what I'm trying to get across here is all of the other things which are impacting on that supply chain, which have a much greater impact on every part of the supply chain. So we take something like food safety and traceability, competition. It isn't something which is just the processor's issue. It's something which feeds right through from the farm side right through to the consumer. The consumer is much more tuned into the whole sustainability of their product. They're tuned into where it has come from, etc. So all of these issues are now intertwined. The opportunity to me is for us to differentiate the sector with regulation and the greening of the environment as something which I believe can really help to pull a lot of this together. It's no longer just the supply chain that the sector has to be aware of. It is the demand chain or the consumer influences. Consumers increasingly have more power. They're the people who are really dictating what they want to buy, the technology, the information, be it through their social networks, their smartphones, etc. That can actually drive demand for products. So Nestlé engage regularly with their customers via social media, which is a quick and low-cost way of getting to the consumer. So consumers are becoming increasingly knowledgeable, complex and fickle. Dominant players have to use the data which is coming from consumers in order to try and influence their buying behaviours. And I think as we move into a more open market globally in the food sector where dominance is already in place and dependencies exist, scale and structure will either hasten or slacken our growth. It won't be a neutral factor when the history books are written. So really, I think all of this intertwining is going to be really important going forward in terms of the role of the consumer in turning the supply chain into the demand chain. Just looking briefly at the beef sector, which is obviously a key part of the Irish food industry. In many ways, with all of the growth projections of Food Harvest 2020, I think a lot of the beef companies feel that they aren't getting the same level of priority. But effectively, it's a massive sector within Ireland. 1.9 billion are the exports in both 2011 and 2012. Massive players, very important. And in terms of the food sector, we're 800% plus self-sufficient in beef. So we can produce enough beef to feed 30 million people. The largest net exporter of beef in the Northern Hemisphere, and sold in 80 plus major EU retailers. So it's an extremely important sector from an Irish food perspective. One of the areas here which is always very contentious in terms of the approach to it, but live cattle figures grew by 35% in the period between January and November 2013. So a significant increase in the live cattle numbers. Looking at it from an Irish perspective, I mean, one of the things, the recent trends within the marketing of food, and just in terms of I meant to just look at the market. If you look at it from a market perspective, the UK accounts for just over 50% of the Irish beef exports. EU is 47%, and a tiny amount, 1%, into international markets. So it's a significantly close to home market. One of the features which has really developed in recent times in the UK market is the new labelling, which is really saying Irish born, British finished. And that's a trend which increasingly is, making the UK consumer aware of the fact that this product, it's a live export from Ireland, has been finished in Britain, and something which shows the consumer. It's part of the labelling requirements, but I think it's a significant development, and not necessarily a positive one from an Irish beef perspective. Wouldn't it be much better to see Ireland bred, Ireland finished? And in terms of the natural advantages that we have in the beef side, we've obviously a grass-fed system, sustainability, a growing piece, and the work which Board B have done on Origin Green, again, extremely important in terms of the whole carbon printing of all of the cattle that we have, extremely strong quality assurance, and we're seen to have a low carbon footprint. The whole challenges, feed costs obviously, the pressure from the dairy side is a massive issue for the beef side, as farms continuously look at the mouths and decide, will we do beef or will we do dairy? So that's a key issue for it. New market entry, and there are some countries that we're still trying to get into, and obviously the price volatility is an issue which is not just in beef. In terms of the opportunities, and there's strong possibilities of markets that have been closed, opening up again, so we're all optimistic on that side. Demand for protein, and protein is in growth, not just Asia in particular. Fifth quarter opportunities to get better value out of that. The focus on value add, I think, provides opportunity, and then the growth in value and volume. So significant opportunity, I think, within the whole beef side. But the pressure from the dairy side is one that's continuing. Just looking at the world population, just over 7 billion in 2012, and projected to grow to over 9 billion by 2050. So massive growth projected within that. Ireland is pretty much in sync at present between the opportunities and the challenges. And what we do over the next period, the key thing is to try to continue that balance. Can we move up the value chain, meet the demands of the abolition in milk quota while offsetting the challenges? That's really the key thing. How can we actually make this transition to a 50% additional production in milk without upsetting this balance? New markets are opening up for beef. There's collaborations. We're moving up the value chain, not just in the dairy side, but elsewhere. There's a need for brand developments. Technology continues to be an important role in all this, and that's right from the data side right to the in-house technology. And then the last piece is the sustainable supply chain, which I think is something where, as a nation, we have a really strong position, and we need to continue to do that. just look, so how are we going to feed the world? How are we going to actually make the most of all of the opportunities without getting caught up in the challenges, but managing the challenges effectively? So in terms of the challenges, input costs are rising, fragmented supply chains, R&D and innovation. I think all of these challenges can be managed, but they can only be managed if we pull together and actually operate with leadership, with communication, and certainly I think the three words here at the bottom in terms of leadership, ambition and confidence. I think that the opportunities at present for the food sector are stronger than they have been. We have a quality product with people who want to buy it. We're recognised globally for having a quality product, and with various food scares, etc., there's a really strong awareness that what's coming out of Ireland is quality, and therefore, you know, it's in demand, and that's not just in Europe; it's increasingly in Asia. And I think it's about developing the ambition and the leadership and the confidence to make sure we maximise the opportunity. Thank you all for your attention.